Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching. You've heard me talk from that before. Simplicity, patience, compassion. These three are your greatest treasures. Simple in action and thoughts, you return to the source of being. Patient with both friends and enemies, you accord with the way things are. Compassionate towards yourself, you reconcile all beings in the world. Lao Tzu. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Simplicity, patience, compassion. Those are the three treasures. The three treasures. Yeah. Last week, I talked from Khalil Gibran's book, The Prophet, and I'm going to continue that this week. I thought I would share a little bit about the history of his life. I mean, really short, if anything down to a couple minutes. But he was born in 1883 in Shari, Lebanon. But he was born into a Maronite Christian household. The Maronite Christians in Lebanon practiced according to the Roman Catholic tradition, but they had their own theology. They had they had their own liturgical and spiritual customs, so they were a little bit different. Early on in his life, his father made some poor decisions. His land and the property that they owned was taken from them, and so his mother decided to move the family to Boston in the United States from Lebanon, which she did. And so he came here as a young boy. I think he was 5 years old or so when he started his formal education here. But in the next couple of years, he returned to Lebanon to go to a Maronite Christian school there and finished his schooling in that Maronite Christian school. Came back to the United States after that, and not long after he returned to the United States, his mother, his brother, and his one sister all passed away in a very short period of time. And so he was supported by his remaining sister who made money being a seamstress in Boston, Massachusetts. She supported him. He was an artful kind of kid. He loved to paint, he loved to draw, he wrote prose, he wrote poetry. And eventually he became very close to Mary Haskell, who was a progressive school mistress, and she became his benefactor and his colleague. And so in 1911, he moved to New York City, where he began writing. And he wrote in Arabic up until this time, but she helped him. She helped him begin to write in English. And one of the books he wrote, and of course the most popular book, is The Prophet. As we know, in 1923, he wrote that book. In 1931, he died at the age of 48 from cirrhosis of the liver. He struggled with alcoholism during that portion of his life, and so his life was cut short by that struggle. And that's a little bit about Khalil Gibran. He wrote this book. It is the story of Al-Mustafa, who is this not a refugee. He was exiled onto the island of Orpheus with these people, and the book starts off by seeing his ship, his family, as it were, come to rescue him and take him out of exile and to join back with them. But before he leaves, he is asked by the people who he has spent 12 years with to leave some wisdom with them. And that's what this book is about, the wisdom he leaves. So different people ask him different questions about different topics, and he then shares his wisdom about those topics. Well, right in the middle of this book, and in fact the longest, most of the wisdom he shared is just a few pages, 1, 2 pages, maybe 3, maybe 2.5. But this section of the book, right in the middle, on crime and punishment, is a whopping 5 pages. It's the topic he spends the most time talking about. And last week I talked about crime and what he said about crime and my thoughts about crime. And the bottom line to all that, if you were here or if you listened to it online, was that no one can sink lower than the lowest among us, and no one can go higher than the highest among us, meaning not our person but our consciousness. No one can sink lower than that lowest point in us. And so his wisdom about that was that our work is to lift that low spot in us higher and higher, to lift that place in us, our place of judgment, of how we are in the world, and to lift that to a higher place, because when we do that, because we are all connected, we lift the whole. We lift the whole of us, and that was his wisdom and his advice to us about crime. So, what does he say about punishment? I felt it was important that I didn't leave just the crime piece with you, but that I share his thoughts about punishment. And as you might expect, this theme of oneness goes through the idea of punishment as well. Because literally, in the pulse of the universe, we are not separate. I'll bet you even after last week, because I'm guilty as well, so I'm going to assume that you were not perfect about looking at the way things are in the world and thinking, well, there's them and then there's us. There's them and then there's us. There's those who are doing this and then there's me who's not doing that. Who's the good? There's the bad and the good. And what he says in the crime portion is you can't tell the difference. There is no separation between the wicked and the good. There is none. There is none. It's a hard concept to grasp. His ideas on punishment are similar in nature in that thread of oneness. He says this: if any of you would bring judgment to the unfaithful wife, let him also weigh the heart of her husband in scales and measure his soul with measurements. And let him who would lash the offender look into the spirit of the offended. And if any of you would punish in the name of righteousness and lay the axe unto the evil tree, let him see to its roots. And verily he will find the roots of the good and the bad, the fruitful and the fruitless, all entwined together in the silent heart of the earth. There's a visual for you. He's asking us to look at the whole picture. He's asking us, in my way of interpreting, is that we look at the scene piece, we look at what we can see, but how often do we consider what we cannot see? What is the essence? What is in the heart of the husband? What is in the heart of the wife? It could be switched around. It's irrelevant which is which. If you would bring judgment to the unfaithful husband, let him also weigh the heart of his wife in scales and measure his soul in measurements, encouraging us to look at the whole picture, what is seen and what is unseen, as we go toward the idea of punishment. Looking at the whole picture. Our justice system isn't set up that way. But I'm asking us, and he is asking us as well, let's not look at the courts and the judgment system. Let's look at me in my life today. When I judge someone, do I look at the whole picture, or do I just look at the action and the activity that seems to be the symptom maybe of something bigger? It's curious. He goes on, and you judges who would be just, again, not the Supreme Court, not the local jurisdiction judges. He's talking about you and me. We are the judges. We have experience, right? Have any experience judging? I have a little experience. My resume pretty good in the judgment department. I could qualify. I don't know about you. We are the judges. So you judges who would be just, he asks this: what judgment pronounce you upon him who, though honest in the flesh, yet is a thief in spirit? It reminds me of the end. Does the end justify the means? A little bit. What penalty lay you upon him who slays in the flesh, yet is himself slain in the spirit? Who is a godly person, and yet made this error in the outer? And how prosecute you him who in action is a deceiver and an oppressor, and yet who is also aggrieved and outraged? the one who is taken advantage of and so who lashes out. How often do we judge this outer thing without recognizing the inner thing at all? At all. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how it... You see how we do that? We have the tendency in that regard. We look at the outer, we judge the outer, it's regardless of the inner. It's regardless of that. Yeah. What about the idea of walking in someone else's shoes? We talk about that. Like any social issue right now. Any social issue. Think of immigration. How in the heck do you know? Do I know what it's like? How could I even imagine what it might be like? I can't. Should I consider that? Do you break the letter of the law? But what about the spirit of the law? Jesus in the Christian scriptures said to us, I haven't come here to tell you about the letter of the law. I'm here to advise you about the spirit of the law, what's underneath what's in the writing. I think that's what Gibran is asking us to do as well. How about this? And how shall you punish those whose remorse is already greater than their misdeeds? How would you punish those whose remorse is already greater than their misdeeds? Is not remorse the justice which is administered by that very law which you would fain serve? Isn't that what we really want to see? Yet you cannot lay remorse upon the innocent nor lift it from the heart of the guilty. Unbidden, remorse shall call in the night, that men may wake and gaze upon themselves. Like, this is really what we want, isn't it? When I do something in error, isn't there a tendency that I have to punish myself worse than somebody else? And isn't that enough to what? To change my heart. Not to make it better. Before, I cannot make it better. I cannot make what happened up to now. I cannot change it. I cannot shift it. I cannot do anything. But he's saying remorse is the thing that allows us to go inside and change our own heart. Would we not allow someone else to do that exact thing? And why isn't that enough? Why isn't that enough? And you who would understand justice, how shall you unless you look upon all the deeds in the fullness of light? The whole thing. The whole thing. Not this one thing. I've said before from this place, I am not the worst thing I ever did. I did that worst thing. But I am not the worst thing I ever did. I am the whole of me. And you are the whole of you. And when we lift the lowest point in us up, we raise the others and all of us higher. When we look upon all the deeds in the fullness of light, only then shall you know that the erect and the fallen are but one man standing in twilight between the night of his pygmy self, his small self, and the day of his God self. And that the cornerstone of the temple is not higher than the lowest stone in the foundation. We've been conditioned to that. The cornerstone, what holding everything up. It's not. It's not. How shall you punish those whose remorse is already greater than their misdeeds? I can say that about myself, and I can say that about the other. Really what we're talking about here, and I talked about it last week and so did he, is how do we change the heart? Because until we change the heart, no matter what law we write, no matter what we say we're about, until we change our heart, nothing is going to change. I submitted to you that the way we are in the world now, with nationalism in a lot of places, for instance, is because our hearts have not gone beyond that point. Our hearts in the collective have not been healed enough for that not to be the way the world works. It's simply the way it is. So the way to adjust that is to lift me up higher. And maybe instead of, our prison system, how is our prison system designed for her punishment? Do we allow anyone in prison, and I don't know a lot about prison reform, so I'm not speaking as an expert, I'm speaking as how many people are there and how we tend to treat them and how we think that that would change anything and how we think that as long as they're over there, we're okay over here, not realizing that exactly what's happening there is affecting us right here. It can't not be, is what Gibran is saying and what I believe as well. It can't not be. What about rehabilitation? What about that? What do we think about justice? Justice when somebody else, here's what we think too often. Well, they're going to pay for that. All right, yeah, they're going to pay. They're going to be thrown away, throw away the key, be sentenced to this or that, and that's going to make it okay. Does it ever make it okay? I don't know if it ever makes it okay. I don't know if it makes it ever okay. What we really want, like I mentioned, is for hearts to change, is for remorse to be there, that self-reflection to be there. I think that's why a lot of times when people deal with crises in their life, some tragedy, losing a son or daughter, maybe all of the young families who lose students to shootings in schools and how they feel about that, they just want to work for change. Why? So that no one has to go through that again. Like, why does that come up often, always? Why does that come up in people? Because we know inherently that changing the whole is how it works. Otherwise, why don't you just the hell with everybody else and let me deal with my stuff? But so often it's, I want to make this change so that no one has to do this again. Why do you care about anybody else? Because they know inherently that it's attached to the whole. It makes a difference. Yeah? I think that's why. Look at what happened in South Africa after Nelson Mandela came out. They had Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They had these commissions to deal with apartheid and the awfulness, I don't know what else to say, the horrible nature of what happened during apartheid. Here was the reason for the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. So that we could promote reconciliation and forgiveness among the perpetrators and victims of apartheid by the full disclosure of truth. Like, that's how their work, not punishment, but let's get together and let me tell you what I did to harm your family, and let me hear you forgive me and forgive yourself, and let's find a way to move from that. That's lifting that up. The same thing happened in Canada when the Canadians decided to use the same sort of system to reconcile, to have reconciliation and forgiveness between the Canadians and the indigenous people who they rounded up and put in schools and denied their existence as a culture. In Canada, that they use this same model. We haven't got to the point where we can use that in the United States, by the way. We haven't had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for that, or for slavery, or for other things as well. That's a way. That's how we lift that up. In 2015, a young man walked into the Charleston Emmanuel AME Church and murdered 9 people. You remember that? Many of you remember that. And it wasn't a long time later when I read an article about the families who said excuse me, who said they had forgiven the shooter. And I was speaking at a church in Raleigh, and I used that example about something I was talking about. And one of the African American members in that community came up to me afterwards, and she said, "Why do we Black Americans always have to be the one to forgive?" And I said to her, "You know what? You don't have to. But you are so spiritually mature that you know that that's the step you have to take to be free. That's the difference." I said, you have a spiritual maturity that is way and above what somebody who might be white and privileged even knows about. I said, I celebrate you for that I celebrate you for that. That is a demonstration of what we all might do. There's we do coffee and conversation here. We share some intimate stories about things, and there's a person in there who's been sharing an intimate story about her ex-husband, and he treated her poorly. I mean poorly, and so for a long time. And so she holds this anger about it, as you might imagine. You know, when you are abused or in trauma, there's some anger associated with that. And she shares about that because she wants to get it out. And she finds herself going there too often, and she doesn't like that. She wants to heal. Right? She wants to feel differently than she feels when she's in anger. Well, I happened to see a post on Facebook that she made, and she has disengaged from her ex-husband. That's the best she can, there's no reason for her to do that. But she happened to see a picture of him on social media. And she posted this about, he didn't look well at all. And she said in her post something like, I still hold a lot of anger, but when I look at him, I have compassion. I know he's suffering. I know that he's suffering. And I wish he wasn't suffering. Like, that's a step, you see. It's not that we get rid of all the anger and all the trauma that we experience, but we find empathy even in the midst of it. That's raising that level up. That's not wanting him to die because I'm so angry. That's recognizing that he is not well. And I wish he wasn't suffering, because that is the look of suffering right there. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, there's that. There's that. And as I mentioned, our prison system is not the place where we too often try to lift people up, to try to let them know that they're worthy. That we try to treat their mental health obstacles. That we try to look at them as if they are the expression of God, because they can't be another, because we're all one. Not often enough. And yet when we do, we get a result. When puppies are taken in to the prison system to be trained for therapy dogs, the lives of those prisoners change even more than those little puppies. They experience unconditional love and they change. They think, well, that person will never change. They had this murder, they did this rape, they did this fraud, they did this. And it happens. It happens. With love, it happens. It happens. Little bits, little bits, little bits. So what is justice and what is it all about? Really, what I'm gathering it's about, and what Gibran, I think, is asking us to do, is soften your heart. I mean, soften your heart. Even though he's saying, look at the full picture, so often we will never know the whole picture. Really? That's the expectation? That's a pretty strong expectation. Soften your heart. Somebody mentioned in the coffee this morning that we had, what about humility? What about a little humility? What about that? What if somebody felt humility from us? What if we didn't place ourselves on the pedestal of us and them? That we stood side by side, hand in hand, arm, shoulder to shoulder, and knowing that that's the way it is. I'll end with this quote by Paul Coelho, who said this: "The world is changed by your example, not by your opinion. The world is changed by my example, by my consciousness, by the vibration of love in me, not by what I believe about something or anything. The world is not changed by my belief, by my righteousness, by my judgment. None of it is changed by my example. So what if someone was looking at my life? What would they see? And is that what I want in the world?" So let's take that into meditation for just a few moments this morning. So breathe in and breathe out. The first place that's important that we erase judgment is toward ourselves. For how we got here, for what we don't do right, for all the obstacles that we haven't overcome, for all the bad things we've done, and what... No, here I am. Here I am in this moment. The question is, what now? What do I want it to look like? How do I want it to feel? Am I committed to lifting my lowest point, to refrain from judgment and punishment, to look with a wider lens, to become clear, and to take another step? So let's just sit a little while with that, breathing in and breathing out. I want to close our time with this quote that I used last week from the sacred Hindu text, the Upanishads. As the human body, so is the cosmic body. As the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. As the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As the atom, so is the universe. And so it is.
I've been a believer, I've been an unbelieving fool. I have been a victim and I have been the victor too. I've stood out on a hilltop, nursing on my pride, while the sting of every sin I made just makes me want to die. I cry out for the answers in all the songs I play. It don't make a difference, no one's listening anyway. There's no one listening anyway. There's no one listening anyway. There's no one listening anyway.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and
at ease. May I be happy. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all be well.